Good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Linda Brashley. Thank you for joining our webinar this morning. I work as a consultant for Agrovista, and it's my job to host today's webinar and hopefully ensure that it runs smoothly. We've got several experts who are outstanding in their fields normally, but today we brought them in from the cold and they're going to talk to you about their areas of expertise. Before they impart their knowledge, we need to cover some housekeeping. So all attendees have been muted, so you won't be able to speak to any of us, but there is a chat function which you should be able to see in the top right-hand corner of your screen. If you want to ask the speaker a question, just type in the question in that chat box and that will come through to the speakers and the various presenters. We aim to cover any questions raised at the end of each section. The webinar is being recorded and you will be sent a link if you wish to view it again, and it will also be available to view on YouTube if you want to direct anybody to have a look at it. Naroso and basis points are available for attending this training session. You should have ticked the box when you registered for the webinar, and you will be contacted by a member of the Agrovista team, so they'll collect your registration details once the webinar's concluded. During this webinar, we will be carrying out polls or questions, and these polls, again, if you look at the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a section there called polls. So when the speakers are presenting, they might ask you, the attendees, for some feedback, and that is where those questions will appear. So if you can take part in those polls, that would be fantastic. Also, if there are any handouts or reading material that accompany the speakers' presentations, they'll also appear in that section. So you should now be able to see that there's a handout section, and you can download any of the handouts that appear up there. So our first speaker today is Steve Butler. Steve Butler is our precision farming specialist. He's based in Yorkshire and covers Yorkshire and North East England, and he's been part of the Agrovista team for 4 years now. He says he particularly enjoys learning about new technology and helping customers develop their businesses, but is really frustrated at the moment by not being able to get out on farm as much as he normally would. Steve's going to cover the benefits of satellite imagery and more specifically variable rate nitrogen. So hopefully we can pass over to Steve now.
Morning, everybody. Oh, we're skipping ahead already. Yeah, so thank you, Linda. As Linda said, I'm just going to cover some quick information about satellite imagery. There's a couple of bits that we're going to cover here, so I'll just give a quick introduction now. So I'm just going to cover who we are and what we're sort of going to achieve today. I'm going to discuss variable rate nitrogen, and then Rich, my colleague, is going to talk about other uses for variable rate for satellite, sorry. And then finally, the important bit is the costs. So we're just going to reiterate the costs as well. So as I mentioned, there's 4 of us in the team in total covering the UK. So there's myself, Steve, Rich, who's all on the call as well. And then there's Graham and Andy, who also cover the east of the country in Scotland. So between us, we've got quite a wealth of knowledge in all aspects of precision farming. So satellite imagery in general, historically, it wasn't actually that accurate. So years before, it was sort of commonplace in the UK or worldwide. Years ago, you'd maybe only get 1 or 2 images a month, or maybe even less than that. And then obviously clouds would play a big part of that. So if a cloud happened to appear at a point where you were wanting an image, if you've only got 2 to pick from in 1 month, you've got quite a depleted selection to look for. But now, as technology's moved on, we're getting a lot more frequent images. So on the whole, we can be looking to see sort of 2 or 3 a week on average. For this reason, years ago, Agrovista typically went down the drone route. So instead of using satellite imagery like quite a few of our competitors were, we were using drones. So obviously they're flying under the clouds, but there's obviously a higher cost that comes in with the drone. We've got to physically go out into the field and fly the field and then come back and process the imagery. But we weren't having the same cloud issues. Whereas now we've turned it on its head. Now the imagery is more frequent. We've felt confident that we can use this data. So for the past couple of years, we've started using this imagery as well. And then obviously I'm just going to cover a couple of topics further down the line with how we're using it. The other thing to just quickly mention is that a lot of new kit out there now is variable rate capable. So the accessibility to be able to do this sort of thing is a lot easier than it ever was before. So nitrogen as a fertilizer, obviously, you know the benefits of nitrogen as a physical fertilizer. It's been a well-used material for a lot of years now. And all we're trying to do is just enhance its use in the field and where it's being placed. So we're just trying to give it a bit more efficiency in the field by targeting the areas that actually need it, as opposed to just blanket treating the whole field. And by doing that, we can often see a yield benefit further down the line. So you might not necessarily see a big saving in the cost of the actual input, but then because you're accurately placing it where the crop demand is, then obviously that'll help push through to yield when you come to combine it. The cost as well is £4.50 a hectare for variable rate nitrogen. So that gets you 1 year's worth of access to your data onto your farm with your fields. And then you can have unlimited maps off the back of that. So whether you do 2 splits or 4 or 3, whatever you do, that's still £4.50. So it's nice and translucent. And then obviously environment, that's quite a big topic in agriculture at the moment. So by proving that you're doing a variable application, it's obviously showing a big environmental benefit. And then it's obviously a widely used thing all across the world. It's not just a bespoke UK item. It's, it's something that's really been adopted all worldwide that's really, really beneficial. So other ways to variable rate apply nitrogen would be using a crop sensor. So things like the Yara N sensor or the classes area. So things like that tend to be a little bit more expensive. It's a piece of physical equipment, as you probably know, that mounts on the tractor. So the usability can sometimes be a bit more difficult setting it up. Excuse me. And then obviously going into the field, you're not quite sure how much nitrogen you're going to use when you drive in there, because it's a passive sensor. It's acting as it's going through the field. So with a satellite image based map, we can tell before we drive in the field how much that field is going to need. So say for instance it's 4 bags, so you can load 4 bags up, go down to the field, jobs a peach. But with something like a N sensor or a Zarya, because it's acting as it's driving, you're not necessarily knowing before you drive in the field what it's going to apply. And obviously you've got a bit more control over what you're doing with a satellite image. You can pick through and look at the image that you feel is best representing that field at the time. And some customers also will have a separate pass. So before they go into the field with an N sensor and actually spread nitrogen, some will drive through just with the tractor, with the sensor on the top, just to get a gauge of what's happening in the field. So obviously you're adding more compaction into that. So potential stumbling blocks. So do you actually know whether your kit's variable rate capable or not? There's obviously quite a lot of brands out there with different unlocks and different screens. So this is it can be quite a complex topic. But as I said to start with, there's 4 of us in our team and we have access to a lot of information between us and external sources as well. So between us, we can soon work out, all you need to do is just give us a ring and we can soon depict whether or not it's capable of applying or not. And sometimes it's a case of just needing a quick unlock that varies between free and, some things cost up to £800, depending on what you need. But yeah, as I say, it's very machine specific, so it's not as easy as just saying, right, it will cost everybody £500, because as I say, there's quite a lot of variance within that. But we've created this form that you can see on the screen there. So, excuse me. So yeah, if you speak to us and we can send you this form out just to fill in really quickly, and we can soon assess what capabilities you have on farm and whether you're getting the best use out of them. It's really easy to use in general. That working out variable rate nitrogen is a really easy topic. It's not, it's not rocket science. And some people who don't have variable rate capabilities require what we call an external rate controller. So that's what the image is at the bottom with a screen and a little black box. So that's just Agrovista's machine control. which is a variable rate controller. So we can offer, you know, an end user all capable abilities to increase their variable rate capabilities. And now I'm just going to pass on to Rich, who's going to talk to you about some other uses for satellite imagery and how it can benefit you on farm. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next person is Richard Dulake. He also works as part of the precision farming team. Richard's based in Nottinghamshire, but covers the whole of the west from Cumbria right the way down to Cornwall, so a busy chap. Richard's worked for Agrovista for just over a year, and he enjoys helping farmers on their precision journey. Richard's going to continue talking about variable rate nitrogen, but specifically how best to utilise your satellite maps of your farms and your fields. So over to you, Richard.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So aside from variable rate nitrogen, there are plenty of other uses for satellite and biomass images. And I'm just going to run through some of those and then a couple of other topics too. So basically, what we're trying to do with precision is build up these layers of data to establish the limiting factor for your fields. So when you combine, say, a satellite biomass NDVI map with a combine data yield map and possibly some soil texture maps, if you've had any soil scanning done, you start to build up a really detailed, comprehensive picture of where your fields are and aren't performing. So this could be used for site-specific crop walking and early investigations as to what might be causing a differing patch of crop within your fields. Also, by looking at biomass images from previous years, you can put together really basic seed maps and basic fertilizer maps to target areas of, example, poor establishment. And whereas these, that aren't as accurate as seed maps produced by EM soil texture scanning, it's a really great start on the precision journey, especially if you've got a variable rate capable drill on farm that isn't being used to its full potential. And moving on to some future improvements. So currently, the industry standard for satellite imagery resolution is on 10-meter grids. There are already services offering higher resolution imagery than this, but at a really high cost, obviously less affordable. But this cost inevitably will reduce as time goes on, making high resolution imagery more accessible to everybody. But you've got to sort of ask the question that is, going down to half-meter grid imagery really necessary? Is there the machinery out there currently that will accurately spread or apply to a small grid like that? Maybe not. So, something to look at. 10 meters is really working well at the moment. And there's a point at the bottom there about cloud penetrating imagery. So with cloud obviously being a bit of an issue with a satellite trying to picture the ground, some companies have tried to develop cloud penetrating imagery, but with limited or no success at all really so far. But I'm sure they're going to keep on developing this, and in the future, if this comes off, then we've got a really good tool that will allow satellite imagery to be used at any time, and images to be got off of variable rate nitrogen platforms as close to a spreading data as you need. And you and your data. So as a company, all raw data that we use and produce from satellite imagery, be it management zones for seed or fertilizer, will ultimately belong to you. So no issues will arise if you need this for anything in the future. We give you access to all of this data visually through our new Agrovista Insight portal, which will provide easy navigation to whatever precision services you sign up for, be it satellite imagery for your variable rate nitrogen, weather station data, green light grower management. So it's a really easy tool, a one-stop shop for all of your precision needs. And what we're aiming to do in the precision team is make it as easy as possible for growers to get on board with precision, as the past complexity of it has sometimes been a stumbling block for people who want to sort of start the journey, as I keep on saying. And just a summary of the costs. So you'll have heard Steve mention this earlier. The variable rate nitrogen is £4.50 a hectare. And we've got to reiterate that that is for as many application maps as you need. So however many you need, that's included in the price. And basic access at £1.50 a hectare will allow you NDVI biomass imagery for the whole season. And it's also worth noting that you could backfill data at £1.50 a hectare per year if you want to sort of layer up maps from previous years and see if any reoccurring patches are taking place within your fields. And that's about it from me. So I'll hand back to Linda now.
So can we ask Steve to pop back on as well? Oh, it's disappeared. It's gone to walk the dog. Here he is. Okay, so we've got some questions come in. So first question is from Gerald. How does the imagery come to the user? Memory stick?
Yeah. Which one do you want to take that, Rich, or do you want me to?
I can take it. So the user has a log on to an online portal, so they'd have access to the latest imagery at all times, as well as all the imagery from that season, from whenever they started their subscription. So they'd log on to the online website and view that whenever, and there would be a link to that through the Insight portal that we've developed. Okay, perfect. Hopefully that answers your question, Gerald. Thomas has asked, who are you sharing farm data with?
So your own data doesn't get shared with anybody. Okay. As Rich said, you'll be assigned the login for the portal yourself, so you can create your own plans through the portal yourself, and then it is literally not shared with anybody. It's just completely private. And as Rich reiterated, all of your data, anything that Agrovista does on your farm for you, whether it be soil scanning or soil sampling, satellite imagery, that is all your own data. So yeah, we don't share that with anybody, and we give you full access to that.
Brilliant. I think you've answered Fran's question in there about can you do your own variable rate plan? So that's a yes, is it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. We've got a question from Johan. Are there any use cases for cost saving between blanket spreader and VR spreading, i.e. return on investment?
Yeah, we can. I'm happy to send you out some information on it. It's a bit of a funny one because it varies quite a lot depending on what your soil type is and how much you vary in your nitrogen from. Mm-hmm. So there isn't a set. The imagery isn't telling you physically how much nitrogen to apply. That's still down to you to decide that ultimately. But what this is doing is showing you where the crop's varying. So again, it's a bit open to your own interpretation. If you're only going to vary that plan by 5% each way, then the cost benefits aren't going to be that substantial. But the more you start to increase the variance, then you're probably going to see a slightly larger difference in cost savings or benefits in yield.
Okay, so I think we've got a suggestion for another webinar here. So Simon's asked that, or he states that there's no doubt that machinery can vary the applications, but he would like to see more objective evidence that there's a real advantage to using it. So maybe you could pull together something in the future and present that where you've got proof that it does work. Ben has asked, how does the 10-meter resolution of satellite compare to drone stroke NBAR? So how does satellite compare to drone stroke NBAR?
Do you want to go, Rich, or do you want me to?
You take that, Steve.
So what we found with drone imagery, we were getting down to sort of 3 centimetre resolution, which is really, really accurate. But when it comes to actually applying it, if you're on a 24-metre tramline system, your first spreader can't physically change the resolution down to 3 centimetres. So at best, no matter how accurate you get your map down to 3 centimetres, for instance, your spreader is only ever going to be able to achieve what it can physically apply. So the majority at best are sort of half-width shut-off. So at best, you're going to get a 12-metre difference. So yeah, again, we found that the cost difference between a drone and a satellite far outweighs the accuracy of the map. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
So Ben has also asked, is the satellite data from Sentinel satellites? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Thomas thinks he's been stupid by asking, does it also work for liquid FERT? Yeah. Yep. So it can work with
any fertilizer application, yeah.
Okay. Are there any stats to say what yield benefit we can expect from variable rate N? So
yeah, so there's been the stat of between 3 and 5% yield increases generally can be seen by using variable rate nitrogen.
Okay. Franz has asked, how often do you record the satellite images?
So I think Steve sort of mentioned this in your bit. So whereas there used to just be a couple of images, possibly a month, these days we're getting between 2 and 3 a week. Right. But they might be cloudy, but that's the reason for more images coming through. So you've got more chance of capturing a clear day.
Okay, brilliant. In your experience, which yield mapping equipment is the easiest and most accurate for combines?
I would say all combine data is better than nothing. That I wouldn't say. I mean, well, obviously Class have a large portray of the market at the moment, so we tend to see a lot of Class data coming through. But obviously New Holland and John Deere are fairly well up there as well. Any data combine wise we can process through. So yeah, as I say, anything's better than nothing. Okay,
brilliant. Johan's asked, how long have you been providing AMC for?
Ooh, good question. About a year, yeah, just over a year, I'd say now, Rich, would you?
Yeah, pretty much since I started, so just over a year. Yeah.
Okay. Crikey, all the questions are firing in now. What happens if it's cloudy and I can't get an image when I need it, but have paid for it?
So again, that's where the benefit of more frequent images comes through. So if you wanted to go spreading tomorrow, for instance, and there was an image today that was slightly cloudy, the chances are fairly high that the day before or a couple of days before you've got a clear image. So again, yeah, you just use that image or whichever image you've got that's clear, that is applicable to what you think the crop is looking like.
Okay.
Again, with the cost of it, it's it being £4.50, it's not a massive investment. So obviously we have to be a bit patient with the clouds because there isn't really a solution for that at the moment.
Okay, we'll just do one last question here. Any questions that you've posted which haven't been answered, if you email them, I'll give an email address at the end. You can email them in and then we'll make sure that everybody's questions are answered. But one last one for the guys here. What would you say is your competitive advantage to other satellite imagery providers? So where does Agrovista shine?
Do you want me to do that, Rich, or are you going for it?
Okay, well, one thing I'd say is that our service sort of outshines a lot of other companies. We really do endeavour to give you that personal service, but when it comes to the actual satellite data, all these companies are using Sentinel satellites, so we're not going to have a cloudy image on tomorrow and another company's going to have a clear image. They're all going to be cloudy on the same day. So technically it's all pretty similar, but when it comes to our precision team, we do provide that more personal service and we'll help you out as best as we can. You can always get us on the phone.
Excellent. Okay, so before we finish off the precision farming bit, we're just going to have a look at the polls. So again, Steve and Rich, if you can comment on the polls. So the first question that we asked everybody that was attending was, do you currently use satellite imagery? Steve, do you want to say what the...
Yes, so we've got 9 people that have answered yes, and that's 45% of the audience, and 11 have answered no, so that's obviously 55%. and that was more than I was expecting, actually. So that's a nice surprise.
Yeah, and quite evenly split as well.
Yeah.
And then the second question that we asked was, Rich?
So do you have variable rate spreader capabilities? It's split about 60-40, so 60% do, 40% don't. It would be really interesting to see sort of who's making use of their variable rate spreaders, because a lot of people have the capability, but sometimes aren't using it at all. Sometimes it might be as simple as getting an AMC or a rate controller to be able to use the full capabilities. So any questions on that, please fire them in, email them in, and we'll do our best to help you out there.
I'm just going to add another poll now that is asking that question.
Brilliant. Cheers, Steve.
Okay. Right, that's great. Thanks very much, Stephen and Richard. We're going to move on now to the next two speakers in this session today. The next person who will appear on your screen as if by magic is Phil Edinburgh. Phil is the head of Agrovista Rural Consultancy. He's soon going to be receiving a carriage clock to put on his mantelpiece in Shropshire, as he's worked for Agrovista for 41 years now. Phil loves the variety that his role brings, but his definite negative is dealing with the Rural Payments Agency, which I'm sure we can all relate to. Phil's going to talk about the obligations and opportunities of nutrient planning. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I don't know whether you can see me, but the screen is doing its best to confuse me. So here we are. I want to talk to you about the changes that are about to befall us with Brexit and the agricultural transition, but particularly about the nutrient side of this. We've seen for a number of years now the statutory management regulation 1, which is nitrate vulnerable zones. You're either in a nitrate vulnerable zone or you're not, and that seems to change by day. And they tell me that as of April the 1st, whether it's relevant or not, Wales is going to be a totally nitrate vulnerable zone. Brexit has happened. I don't want to talk about that, but what hasn't happened is that cross-compliance hasn't disappeared. All the rules pertaining to cross-compliance were dragged into English and British legislation before Brexit happened. So unfortunately, we've still got those rules, and they're designed, as it says on the screen, to reduce water pollution from nitrates. So you're probably all quite familiar with those. You have to, the key to this presentation is really one word: planning, because planning is fundamental to being compliant. We are quite happy to do fertilizer recommendations, to write in the back of a diary that's stained with the silage effluent what we do, but record keeping is fundamental to what we need to do now and going forward. So you're quite familiar with those things. You have to plan these 4 steps: calculate the amount of nitrogen in the soil, the optimum amount the crop needs, etc., etc. So that's the NVZ regulations that you're all familiar with. And then they introduced something else in 2018, coincidentally in April, and these are the farming rules for water, and they became law about diffuse pollution prevention. And actually, most people saw them. The Farming Advisory Service kept sending out bulletins, but from my experience, not a lot of people took any notice of them. And the rule 1 goes back to what I said from the beginning. These regulations require that all nutrient applications are planned so that they don't exceed the needs of the soil, they don't give rise to pollution, and they take into account the weather conditions. Now, recently, up until these rules really started to bite, it was almost acceptable to apply dirty water in the winter. That is no longer the case. And if you see what's in red, that's the reason why, that you cannot justify application of nutrients of any sort, whether it be organic or inorganic, in the winter, because there's no crop need, there's no soil need. And in the past 3 weeks or so, particularly in the large dairy areas, people have been falling foul of this regulation. So that's just a bit of a heads up, really. We've had for a number of years, 15 years or more, a solution to being compliant. And that only isn't a solution to being compliant, it actually helps you to plan your nutrients. The techie guys have told us where to put the stuff. What we need to think about is what we're going to do with our organic manures and our inorganic manures. Are we compliant, and are we using them to the best of our ability? And at the risk of repeating myself, the first step to that is doing plans. Now, we've had a piece of software that's like a one-stop shop that you can do a nutrient plan, and you can do a manure plan to demonstrate compliance, and also you can use the same bit of kit to do a soil plan. So we think we're on top of the game with this. We've had this in development for 15 years. It's been inspected by the assurance people. It's been inspected by the Environment Agency and the Rural Payments Agency and the Crop Protocol people. So we're quite confident that of all the people that need these plans, our plans fit that bill. Assurance schemes is pretty easy. They just want to see them. The crop protocols want a bit more evidence, but the Environment Agency and the Rural Payments Agency go through these things with a fine-tooth comb. I know, because I've had lots of people who have fallen foul of the regulations for whatever reason, and they really do look at these records that you are supposed to keep for 5 years. I don't know how many people watching can hold their hand up and say that they've got 5 years worth of manure and nutrient plans in their office, but that's what you're supposed to have. So the good thing going forward is, although we don't have the complete detail, we do know that this move forward with agricultural transition into something called SFI will give you the opportunity maybe to have your nutrient planning funded, and almost certainly that will carry on into ELMS. We don't know how much they're going to pay, but we do know that it's fundamental. Water, air, soil are fundamental to you getting money as a subsidy going forward. And we believe that the first step to that is to do some serious manure and nutrient planning, and to seriously think how you get the best out of your resources. And I believe that we have the software to do that. And with our soils team and our precision people, we have the knowledge to help you make the best of that. There will be some money for precision equipment. There will be some money for data management under a number of these new schemes. I could talk all day about this, but I'm going to pass you back to Linda, who will introduce you to my colleague Lewis, who will tell you quite a bit more about agricultural funding and transition. But I've got a great product, and I think it's useful for everybody to engage with. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Phil. That was great. The last speaker today, last but not least, is Lewis Bucklin. Lewis Bucklin's employed by Agrovista as a farm business and environmental consultant. He's also heading up our ELM, environmental land management team. So his aim is to work with agronomists and deliver environmental advice to farming clients. Lewis is based up in the Scottish borders, but he does actually cover the whole of England and Scotland, and has worked for Agrovista for almost 10 years now. Lewis is going to talk or review the impending changes regarding farm support and highlight the new support schemes which will be available during the transition phase. So over to Lewis.
Thank you, Linda. Morning, everybody. Following on from what Phil was saying, we are certainly going through a time of change within the industry now. And despite Brexit, the removal of the CAP was inevitable. It was going to happen, and that's obviously underway now. Each of the devolved administrations are actually responsible for this process, but for the purposes of today's talk, it's going to be concentrating on the English system and the English transition, purely because we've got more information relating to that at this moment in time. We've always known that BPS was going to be going by the end of 2027 in England. But what we weren't sure of was how fast that was actually going to happen. But on the 30th of November, we finally got notification from George Eustace. The announcement came of the Agricultural Transitional Plan. This is the next 4 years of the transition and how things are going to change, and gives us an overview of what's going to happen. And as Phil said, there's still a lot of details lacking. We've got no idea of levels of funding yet. But hoping a lot, like what we're going to go through now, you'll see a lot of this will come clearer in the next few months. What this first slide shows is, the rate at which the subsidy is going to actually drop in the next 4 years. 2020, you can see how much people are receiving in physical terms on the left-hand graph, and then in terms of percentage, how this is going to drop in the right-hand graph. And the question to you on one of the polls is, does this transition, the drop in income, worry you as a grower and your farm business? Is this something that's going to be pose a problem to you? Putting it into a table form, you see, you're looking at there. You take your average 200 hectare lowland farm, you'll be getting a payment in the region of around £46,000. So that's what you'd received in 2020. But going forward to 2024, you're going to be around 20,000, 50% less than what you've received just now in December. And for some people, that is going to pose a considerable cash deficit for them within their business, and it's how you're going to make up that difference. As we say, these reductions are there, but what's actually going to happen with that money? The money that's been taken out of people's BPS money, that money is guaranteed still to be available to farmers up until the end of the current government in 2024. So where's this money going? It's going to go into our existing schemes. So countryside stewardship is one way of being able to make up for some of this lot of money that's going to start being taken. This is going to be available until 2023, and you've got 3 more years of applications into this. So again, looking at the polls, to see who's in a scheme already, who's interested in going into a scheme. It'd be interesting to see what you as the audience are actually thinking. It's a good opportunity where it fits to actually make up for some of that loss of income that you're making. And it's definitely worth looking at if you're not in one already. As part of ELM, they are going to start looking at pilot schemes, which will be expressions of interest from next month. And the idea behind the pilots is actually to understand how the new schemes will work when they're rolled out properly in 2024. As part of this is actually trying to work out how much to pay people. So one of the advantages potentially from going into one of these pilots is that you may be paid over what would normally be paid under ELM to do particular options. But conversely, you may actually be paid less, and some options will, the idea is that the options will change during this pilot to actually work out what is the true value of those options to the grower. As Phil mentioned, we are going to have the SFI, the Sustainable Farming Incentive. This is tier 1 of ELM, and it's been introduced next year for farmers and growers to go into as a way of starting their transition into ELM. This will be looking at soil and water, as Phil mentioned, and looking at other environmental benefits, as well as farm nature and biodiversity on the farm. By late 2024, we'll have the remaining tiers 2 and 3 of ELM introduced, and we'll go through those shortly to show you the different elements of what they are there. Some of this other money that's being modulated out of the BPS is going to go towards capital grant schemes, which we'll go through, looking at resource protection and productivity, as well as options for retirement and for new entrants into the business, and also looking at research and development. So with this drop in the BPS being quicker than we initially thought, our businesses are going to start feeling the effect of this financial drop quite hard. The SFI was introduced late last autumn. It was almost as a reaction to help stem the financial blow. There was increasing pressure from the industry that farmers were going to struggle with this loss of BPS and with no clear idea of how to engage with new schemes with such a long transition period in place. So SFI, you're looking at soil management, integrated pest management, nutrient management and livestock management. All areas within businesses are actually carrying out for farm assurance already. And as we've said, we've still got no idea of levels of funding, but you are going to be paid for it and you're going to be rewarded even if you started early. A lot of these fundings in the past, you sign up to do something and then a grant comes out and you're no longer eligible to go into it. Luckily, this time they said if you started the process, you will be rewarded going forward as well. And some of these capital grant schemes that we're going to go through will become sort of prerequisite to some of these schemes. So your soil health and your nutrient planning are all going to be very useful in parts of going after some of these capital grant schemes. So looking at an overview of ELM, split into 3 tiers. Tier 1, as we've mentioned, the SFI, starting next year. 4 elements to begin with, highlighted in red there. So they're the ones that are going to be introduced to begin with. After that, there'll be a rolling process of introducing things like field margins, cover crops, and options to help with water storage and water efficiency use. A very entry-level option for growers to get in and get some funding. Hopefully, we should find out in the next few months what that level of funding will actually be. Tier 2, which is going to be known as the local nature recovery. Options there will be very similar to agreements seen with countryside stewardship, able to be tailored towards growers' options on their own farm to suit their system to make it work for them. You've then got Tier 3, which is a landscape recovery. Now, this is a much larger scale, widespread management. You're looking at AOMBs, national parks, catchment areas. And both Tiers 2 and 3 will be looking at collaboration and trying to get farmers to work together to provide joined up environmental management across holdings, either just with local farmers or on a much larger scale. So as we said, with some of this funding, some of it is being diverted towards grant schemes under the transition plan. So for those people who are struggling or think they're going to have problems during this transition period, as of next month, there's going to be support available through the Farm Resilience Fund. There will be funding available to you to understand your business and sort of plan for the future. Again, we've got no details yet, but likely applications through the farm portal, through your RPA portal where you log in already and have access to this and sign up to get some help to help you pave the way for going forward. The Farmer Investment Fund, so you've got 2 levels of funding here. The Equipment and Technology Fund is going to be very similar to the Countryside Productivity Scheme we've seen over the last 3 years. A simple online application for items that can be used to help improve efficiency and productivity on a farm. A very simple process and a scheme that's been taken up well in the last 3 years in England. So they're going to see another round of that coming through, which will be later next year, I think, for that one coming in. In addition, we've got the Farmer Transformation Fund. Now, if you look at what's involved with this, this is very similar to your leader grants that we've seen in recent years. Much larger scale projects where farmers can look at investing in equipment, technology, robotics, infrastructure, from much larger changes in your farming system. Other areas could be including reservoirs, looking at water storage and efficiency, precision agricultural equipment and robots. And this is a scheme that's going to be open later this autumn, which will be an interesting one to see levels of funding and what they're looking, but again, very similar to what we've seen from Leader. Slurry investment. Slurry is a big environmental problem. As Phil said, even with dirty water now becoming an issue for growers, you've got options here for improving your slurry storage. Funding has never been able to be given to meet legislation, so this funding will take you over and above current requirements, but it will actually help you be more resilient going forward as regulations change and obviously become more stringent in time. This will be available late next year, but will be able to help you with slurry stores and potentially towards the equipment for precision application, aiming towards net zero, and with changes in slurry application methods from 2025, where splash plates are no longer allowed. This could be a seriously good option for those farmers who need to come up to the specification for the new legislation. A new one for England is a new entrant support scheme. So we are going to have retirement funds for those farmers looking to come out of farming, as well as new entrant supports, trying to get those young farmers who want to come into farming, giving them access to land, giving them access to mentors and landowners to help them with training and get them into this process. There'll be options there to help them with that support and the training, and this will be available next year with more information coming out later this year. We need to remember as well that there's other sources of income out there. We don't need to rely solely on the government resources from the RPA. Building mitigation, part of any planning permission now for industry and housing, requires those developers to actually make good for any environmental loss that they have from that development. So you've got options like your Environment Bank and other private sector companies out there who are administering these schemes, which will pay farmers to look after their land in an environmentally friendly way, guaranteed money for 30 years with options for upfront lump sums available, as well as local funding streams being available through water companies and local groups. Local catchments have money available to help with infrastructure, resource protection. So where does this leave us? Some of the key things we need to look at is engage with countryside stewardship. We've got 3 years to look at it. Use that as a way of helping you transition from subsidy from BPS through to a support system from environmental management. Consider the ELM pilot if it fits in with your business circumstances, and start looking at preparing for the SFI, which is being introduced next year. As we've said, we've got our soil health department who can help with the soil health side of things. Phil's already gone through nutrient planning. Our agronomists help growers already with integrated pest management, and start consulting with your vets and feed advisors for, for livestock management plans. All of these you can discuss with your trusted advisor, and hopefully the trusted advisors will become integral to these new schemes to provide advice to you to help you through it. There are going to be lots of schemes available in the forthcoming years. We're going to be on top of them. We're going to be looking at them. Please keep in contact, and if you have any questions, please do ask.
That's great for that. If I can ask Phil to pop back on again, if he's still there. And what we'll do is we'll have a look at the results of the polls first, and then we'll have a look at some questions that have come in regarding the presentation. So, Lewis, would you like to run through the first one, the first poll?
Yeah, so we've got 13 answers for interest in the ELM pilot. So interesting that 8 people would be interested in looking at it. So that's very encouraging.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Likewise with countryside stewardship, there's very good interest in taking up a scheme in the next 3 years.
And I think as a team we found that as well, haven't we, that there's been a lot of interest in taking part in countryside stewardship recently.
There has, yeah. I think that is farmers growers realising that there's an option there to help them through this transition period.
Yep. The next question, does the transition and drop in BPS worry you as a business? Phil, what do you think to the replies there?
I'm not surprised that 71% of the people are concerned about it. They do right to be concerned about it. The good thing about it is that all this money that's been taken away is there, and whilst this Parliament goes on, all we need to do is work out how to access it. And I think going forward, despite popular rumour, we're actually still going to need food.
Yeah, perfect. You posted a poll as part of your presentation, Phil, about do you currently engage in nutrient planning? And yeah, the results there are quite surprising and encouraging.
They are indeed, yeah. My only caution is that we need to be confident that the records that we're keeping and the plans that we're making are compliant, because they are going to be open to more scrutiny. And I think that all of us, including me, can start to really review: are we getting the best from both inorganic and organic manures? So. Yeah. Thanks for answering. You've come up with some good results, but we need to do more work, I believe.
Okay. If we have a look at the questions that have come in now, so let's have a look there. Farmer collaboration. So Thomas has asked, do we think that there'll be more funding available for farmers working together to achieve objectives?
Absolutely. You know, tiers 2 and 3 of our is designed for collaboration and for people working together. So definitely there will be rewards there between that.
Okay, and obviously that does already exist with the facilitation fund.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, it's an interesting one. What are your thoughts about the Slurry investment scheme and whether they will be available to farms that are not within a catchment sensitive farming area?
I actually think they will be available. I can't guarantee it, but the direction of travel is to avoid water pollution and to give us a cleaner, better environment. So I can't see that they're. You might have to jump through more hoops. It might be harder to get, but I can't see that they're going to restrict people from wanting to do the right thing.
Okay, perfect. Johan's asked a question here about where for these machinery funded schemes, whether you can buy machinery that's sourced from outside of the EU, so whether it has to be British manufactured equipment. Who would like to answer that one?
Based, if you look at the countryside productivity scheme, as long as it meets specification for what they're looking for, there's no issue from where you source it from.
Yeah, brilliant.
Just one word of caution: you mustn't take a photograph of it on the delivery lorry because they think you might send it back.
It's got to be in situ working.
In situ.
Yeah. Okay. Johan said that we didn't talk about anything to do with carbon sequestration. Are we going to be doing more about that, or would you be able to put together another presentation about the funding that's available, income streams for that?
Do you want to answer that, Lewis? Or
what I was going to say on that is that there are no details as yet. Soil health is obviously part of the scheme. They are obviously paying for soil health, but they haven't actually said yet what it is. Chances are that will be part of the carbon sequestration, will be in the soil health part of it.
Okay.
If I could add, carbon is it's not an hour's webinar, it's a 3-day webinar, frankly. But what we do know is that carbon sequestration by planting trees is not really on a farm scale. It's on a much bigger land scale, and that's probably going to be part of tier 3 of ELMS going forward. So, but there's everything between there and planting acres of trees that we can do, and we're starting to get a handle on it. There's been some good presentations by the Farm Advisory Service that you can look on the web for. So we're on the case. The starting block, we believe, is soil management.
Okay. Going back to the Slurry investment fund, somebody's asked whether they think it will be solely focused on Slurry or whether AD and digestate might fall into that as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I can see Phil laughing there. I know people have entered into the countryside productivity scheme to get equipment which is used for AED. Again, if it's an agricultural application for agricultural benefit, There's been no criteria set in the past that it has to be purely from livestock slurries in order to use it.
Okay. I think we've covered most of the questions that have come in there. As I said earlier, Bill's just popped a question in saying, regarding carbon sequestration, surely we should be looking for farms to offer options to big firms who are currently buying land to plant trees. Any thoughts on that?
I don't quite understand the question, actually.
So looking for farms to offer options to big firms. So obviously they're thinking that big firms should be the ones that are looking at carbon sequestration for the trees, and so they should be doing it on a large scale rather than an individual farmer. I think that's
okay. The reality is that carbon sequestration and carbon trading has been going on for quite a long time. There are companies that specialize in carbon trading, and some of them are airlines, some of them are supermarkets. That they're already investing in this area. The government has a scheme. I think they've put 60 million into it for people to plant large tracts of land. That's a decision for landowners, perhaps not a decision for Agrovista.
Yeah, okay. And Rick has suggested another session going forward, so another webinar. He'd like to have a webinar focusing just on SFI and ELM. I think Lewis will probably agree that at the moment there just isn't the detail. We don't have the detail.
Absolutely. As soon as more detail comes out, we will host updates and how to actually integrate this into the farm business and how to go about it. So definitely we'll be doing that.
Yeah, when we have some more information. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for the questions that you posed there. Thank you, everybody, for attending today and for our excellent team of speakers. As I said earlier, if you have posted a question and it's not been answered, if you could email that to enquiries@agrovista.co.uk, we'll ensure that you get a reply to your query. So thanks very much. Thanks for the whole team. Thanks for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.